today's live. I got my sparkle water, I got my tarot cards. We are ready. If you're new here, hi, my name is Madison. I am an energy healer. I also teach different quantum and metaphysical concepts that teach you how to connect with your inner power, your intuition, your own channeling abilities, all of that. Brought these beautiful babies to join us. This is my newest crystal. I'm obsessed. This is I want to try to get the name right, carborundum, and it's a master healer stone. So I'm gonna actually use this in some energy healing I'm gonna do on myself today. So I'll let you guys know how that goes. So today we're gonna be talking about, is Christ coming back from the perspective of somebody who is not religious? There is obviously a lot of talk around what's going on with everything in the world. Is Christ coming back? And I personally myself have wondered about why people think that Jesus is coming back or Christ is coming back. And what I did is I did a mix of channeling and a mix of kind of pulling from knowledge that I had from past experience to create this message where we're going to talk about Christ consciousness, who Jesus really was. And I'm going to give you guys some tangible things you can do to connect with this energy. So let's get into it. I actually was raised Southern Baptist. So I was raised in a Southern Baptist church, and it very much was the perspective of like fire and brimstone, and God was always angry with you. And that didn't align for me because as a child, I remember being like, okay, yeah, I think there's something out there, but like, I don't think it's just like angry that we exist, right? And I read a lot of the Bible as a child and as an adult. And every time I read the Bible, I was like, I don't think the God that I believe in wrote this. I do think that like an angry man wrote this, right? And that might be controversial, but that's at least been my opinion or perspective, right? So I did not really have anything to do with religion or spirituality or anything like that from 16 until probably 28. And during that time, I was very much addicted to alcohol and a couple different types of pills, and like I was not present, so therefore my spiritual gifts were really shut down, right? But after I started to step back into my spiritual work from a more holistic perspective, I started to realize like, oh wow, this actually feels really aligned for me. So for me, what that looked like was whenever I first got into recovery about 4 years ago. If you do not know, I'm in recovery. I'm in AA. And whenever I first got into AA, hello, I see you guys in the comments. Thank you for being here. Whenever I first got into AA, it was very much sort of perceived that you needed to kind of like pick a religion, at least where I am at the moment, right? And so I dabbled in, a couple of different religions. None of them really resonated with me. And then I kind of found my own, path of more focusing on spiritual, quantum, and metaphysical concepts rather than a particular, religious stream. And so since I've been doing that, it's really, really allowed me to get this really full circle perspective on how the world works, how all these different concepts are intertwined. And one thing that I really want to talk about is how we can all actually access what Jesus came here to anchor on this planet. And it's very likely that if you're tuned in, you are tuned in because you really carry that frequency, right? So if you identify as light workers, a part of the 144,000, you are people who are able to tap into this consciousness and this frequency that we're going to talk about today. So if that resonates, you're absolutely in the right place. I see love from Germany. I am so glad to see all you guys in the comments. Love from LA. Hello, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being here, especially if you are new to the channel. I'm so glad we got connected. I've just kind of been sending a note to my spirit guides to bring in anybody that I'm supposed to help or enlighten or share things with. So I love to see you guys being here. Thanks so much. Okay, so since I was a kid, I've been able to connect with spirits, and that for me has looked like past loved ones, and that's also looked like angels. So as a child growing up in a Southern Baptist church, I was always able to connect with angels in church. I was always able to connect with Jesus at church. But I was very confused because whenever I would channel or see spirits, I would normally see them as some sort of representation of what they were here in the physical. I like to think it's like their hologram version of them that I'm seeing. It's almost like a hologram version of maybe the version of them that I would recognize, right? And I was always very confused because anytime that Jesus would come to me, he was never white. He was always, at the time, I don't think I had the knowledge to maybe know that he was more like Middle Eastern, like Pakistani, but I was always very confused because he was not white as he was maybe portrayed as I was growing up, right? So I started to see that there were definitely some differences between this being that I was channeling that I believe to be Christ consciousness versus how it was portrayed in the church, right? And then I really wanted to start to see how everybody talking about like Christ coming back in the end of the world, what's actually true of that. So I went into the Akashic records, which is essentially where you can tap in and you can get very authentic, very high vibrational information and knowledge about what's going on in the world, as well as things that are to come, as well as things that are in your timeline. And I like to think of the Akashic records being where you can tap in this state of meditation and you can see what the likely timelines are and you can kind of see what those timelines represent. So what I was shown is that there absolutely is not a timeline of a physical incarnation of this character of Jesus Christ coming back into the physical. What there is an active timeline that's happening in real time is the ability that Christ had, or the character Jesus Christ. I like to call him metaphysical Jesus, so that's just what I'll refer to him for the rest of the time. So metaphysical Jesus came here to teach us how to do things like do metaphysical healing, have a galactic understanding, be able to channel, all these different things, right? And if you look in the Bible, you talk about all these incredible stories of all these different things that he was able to do, like get demons out of people and like touch people and heal them. And I always very much believed like that happened and we all have those abilities. And a big part of the reason that Jesus came was actually to show us all that we are all fractals of God and we all have those abilities to tap into that frequency if we learn how metaphysics in the quantum world works, right? So right now, Christ, very much as an angelic figure or as a ascended master, is very much around Earth right now, very much connecting with a lot of light workers to anchor this Christ consciousness. What I was seeing is that during the time that Christ consciousness was originally trying to be anchored onto the planet, there were a ton of light workers that are here now that were also there then, which is why a lot of us feel really drawn to maybe Christ as a metaphysical healer, right? Or metaphysical Jesus. And now we're kind of being called to step back into some of that energy when it comes to things like doing metaphysical healing, having a galactic understanding. And a big thing that came through when I was channeling this is how things exist other places outside of Earth. I could do a whole other episode on that because that's something I've been really interested in is like, here on Earth, we don't have it figured out. So like, are there places that do? And if so, what are they doing, you know? So metaphysical Jesus came into my quantum healing session that I was doing recently to teach me how to remove entities and implants. And so whenever I do quantum healing or energy healing, I normally connect with a higher dimension or a higher realm, and a lot of times I will have different goddesses or angels or spirit guides come through. And so whenever I first started doing energy healing, I would always invite metaphysical Jesus to join me and to help me through the process, because I'm very clairvoyant. So for me, energy healing is very visual. My eyes are closed, but I'm experiencing an entire energetic experience within like your body and your light body when I'm doing the quantum healing and the Reiki, right? And at first, I didn't know how much I was going to see and experience, and I didn't know what to do with it all. So I started bringing metaphysical Jesus in and being like, hey, can you tell me what to do? So I wanted to share with you guys a couple things that I was taught through channeling metaphysical Jesus with quantum healing or energy healing, biggest takeaway that I learned was anytime you are about to do a session, regardless of if you think that you're going to do an entity removal or if it's just a regular session, I want you to visualize yourself putting on some sort of glove. For me, this first started happening whenever I first started to see entities in quantum healing sessions, and I was like, whoa, what is this and what do I do? And Metaphysical Jesus popped in and was like, okay, first of all, pause, don't touch that, what that is. And for me, it looked like a snake just really coiled up in like the bottom of somebody's chakra, and it's almost like the top of the chakra was clear, but this bottom snake entity was running the show, right? And normally prior to this, I had seen energy as like this dark energy, almost like a black tampon that I would like pull out, right? And so then now it shows up and I'm like, what the hell is this? So I kind of like pause for a moment. I like bring in my guides. I even got like a little like, ooh, disconnect. And as I'm doing this, I am getting, these downloads that are like, yeah, this is what an entity or an attachment looks like. And so this is a negative being or a negative energy that because this person at one point made a decision when they were in a really bad place, they kind of unknowingly allowed this parasitic energy to kind of come into their sacral chakra, their heart chakra, their throat chakra. There's a ton of different ways it could happen, right? I could do a whole separate video on that. But what he taught me was like, you have to get rid of these things out of that person's body and then refill that hole with the light and love or the codes that you're working with within quantum healing. So first thing, I don't know if you guys have ever seen those Hulk hands. That's the best way I can describe it. Is it's almost like he kind of dropped Hulk hands on me. And so he was like, first of all, like, you don't want to touch any of that. So he put these like giant Hulk hands on me. And whenever I had the Hulk hands on, whenever I went in the chakra to pull out the entity, it was almost as if the entity tried to get on me, if that makes sense. Like as I was pulling out the entity, it was almost like the entity was like, oh, well, if I'm not living there, I'm living in you. And I was like, oh my gosh, is that why I have the Hulk gloves? Because the Hulk gloves keep the entity from being able to get to me. And it was very much like, yes. So then by, the time I got the entity out, it did take a lot of time the first time that I came across this. And I did have to ask my guides to help me figure out how to get it out because it was very, if you run across an entity that's been in somebody for, years or at the soul level for lifetimes, that entity is like, this is my home, the fuck are you doing here, right? That's the energy. They don't want to be moved. And so sometimes I cannot do it alone. And I'll have to bring in my guides and I'll have to ask them to kind of like loosen up the bottom of where the entity is so I can like fully like get it out is like the best way to describe it. As I'm doing this, I work with a code, and that code is M369, and that code I'm placing into the entity as I'm doing this work, and that code takes the entity and basically returns it to sender. So wherever that entity came from, it's going back there, it's not getting into me, it's not bopping into like the next person that comes through, it's fully being returned to whatever dimension it originated in, right? So I do very much believe that Christ consciousness is coming back to teach us these incredibly profound things that you can only find through literally channeling and connecting with the ascended masters like Jesus Christ, But I also think that there is a lot of galactic knowledge that comes with this. And by galactic knowledge, you will notice like in the Bible, Jesus did not align with religious people. He did not align with scholars. He aligned with people who thought outside the box, astrologers, channelers, things like that, because he was aware that more than just the 3D existed, and he really wanted to figure out how all of those things work together. So I truly believe if you want to tap into Christ consciousness, you have to figure out how metaphysical concepts, quantum concepts, and like the 3D world all work together in tandem. I'll give you an example. So I do quantum healing now. Quantum healing is working with the concept of going in at a soul level and figuring out where the pain or the trauma originated and using different codes and symbols to collapse that timeline, right? And a lot of that I have learned through channeling these ascended masters to be able to figure out how all these things work. So a lot of us that, as I mentioned prior, were here during this time period of Christ consciousness being anchored prior, a lot of us are now back as the 144,000, and we are now being called to bring back the energy of metaphysical healing, galactic understanding, and channeling abilities. That's another thing that's interesting is like Jesus did so much profound channeling, and then it was kind of presented as if, you have to be special to channel or to connect with God or source. And I don't believe that at all. I believe we all have the immediate ability to connect with God, source, whatever it is you believe in. I believe that we all have the ability to connect with ascended masters that want to help us on our journey. If that's something that you want to learn about or you want to learn how to do, I actually have a class where I'll teach you. It's my Akashic Records class. And that is just something that I really want everybody to know. Like all the things that Jesus came here to do, we can all do, and we're all learning to do in the process. And it's not at all that Jesus was, this man that was put on a pedestal. He very much was, but he came here to teach us like, hey, you can do these things in a human body. But I want to talk about a couple of things because as I was just kind of tapping into this, I asked like, how did you, this is me kind of channeling, metaphysical Jesus. I'm like, how did you get all these abilities? And like, how can we get them? And he was like, okay, well, first of all, I want you to immediately not compare I'm 33 right now. So he's like, I know a lot of the Bible stories are based on like these miraculous things that I did at 33, you're 33, the human mind's immediately going to compare, right? So first of all, stop that and acknowledge that you're on your own path. And then let's talk about that really big gap in the Bible where I wasn't mentioned. And what came through is that from age 12 to 30, that Jesus was in these various mystery schools all across Egypt. He was being taught how to channel, how to turn water into wine, how to manipulate the energetics of things like water to be able to walk on it, like things that like make my brain hurt as somebody who actively studies and teaches quantum and metaphysical healing, right? And it's so cool because now I think that there are a lot of people who maybe don't fall into traditional religion that feel really connected to Jesus. And that's why, is because he was this incredible metaphysical healer, this incredible channeler. He was also a truth seeker, and he also was not somebody who was in the box by any means, right? He was very much somebody who came here to challenge the confines of reality and allow reality to conform to him rather than him conforming to reality. And that's awesome, right? Because that's what we're all here to do. None of us came here to shrink or to fit into a box or to fit into whatever the Matrix designed us to do. We all came here to step into that Christ consciousness, that 144,000 energy, that light worker passion that we have to freaking be here and to change the world, because that's what, if you're tuned into this channel, you probably came here to do. You're probably here because you as a soul saw like people on earth, they don't have it figured out, and I don't have it figured out totally, but I'm going to go down as a human and I'm going to try to help them and love them and give them support and knowledge. I'm going to try to remember who I was before I came into this, and that's the energy that Christ consciousness is bringing and cultivating, right? So I absolutely believe Christ consciousness is coming back for everybody to access, but I do not believe that there will be a physical manifestation of an avatar of Christ that comes back. I do believe it will be a ton of us channeling Jesus, a ton of us being able to learn from Jesus and things such as those quantum healing experiences that I was mentioning. And that's what's going to allow us to kind of all come together and say, hey, here's what we know now. How can we all kind of pool our information to figure out how the world works and how to do things like heal on demand? Because I've done a lot of really interesting metaphysical healing on myself, a lot of quantum healing on myself. For example, I had a cavity that I healed with Reiki and quantum healing. Like legit went to the dentist, had a cavity, was leaving the next day to go on a retreat to Costa Rica. Went to Costa Rica for a week, came back. The whole week I was going to Costa Rica, I did Reiki and energy healing on specifically that area. Came back and they were like, that's so weird, you don't have a cavity anymore. But like this x-ray, you definitely did have it. And I was like, and at this point I was in the closet, so I didn't tell the dentist, like, yeah, I freaking Reiki healed that shit. But by in the closet, I mean like in the broom closet. That's what I referred to it as when I was doing a lot of spiritual work on myself to figure out how my gifts work, but I wasn't openly sharing that information with others, right? And then now here we are, I'm telling you guys about, Reiki healing my cavities. So welcome, I'm glad you're here. So other things that I wanted to talk about around what to do to help to elevate our consciousness to be able to tap into Christ consciousness. First thing, learning any form of metaphysical healing, whether this be Reiki or whether this be quantum healing, or at least starting by getting a session and figuring out what the heck does this even mean and how does it resonate with me? Because I very much believe all light workers at minimum need to know how to protect their energy. And what that looks like is, for me personally, whenever I go out in public, for example, I go to the grocery store, I bubble myself in quantum codes to not allow anybody else's energy to get onto me. And then I also have this ring programmed to absorb any negative energy that is like directed towards me or whatever, right? And that is just some of the basic things that if you're a very sensitive person, something like a quantum healing is going to give you a lot of these really quick, really on-demand ways to physically heal and protect your energy so you're not picking up on others' energy. Because the biggest thing I see with light workers is a lot of times people are feeling frustrated or angry or depressed and they don't know why, and it's because you picked up somebody else's energy not knowing, because you were trying to be their space of light in their darkness, right? And that's beautiful, but that's actually really detrimental to the soul, right? So energy healing allows us to clear all of that out and then be able to set up the boundaries to where we don't allow those things back in the future, right? So if this is, something you want to learn more about, or if you want to learn channeling, I do actually have an on-demand Akashic Records class. Akashic Records, I truly believe, is the best way to learn how to channel, because when you tap into the Akashic Records, you're tapping into solely a container of light. It is protected by these light beings called the Lords of the Records, and they make sure only light energy gets in. So if you're new to channeling, you are going to want to make sure you have some way of knowing you're connected to a light energy. And by channeling the Akashic Records, you automatically have that kind of safety, right? And then within the Akashic Records, you can access things like, why did I come here? Why do I have gifts? What am I supposed to do with them? But you can also access things like me going in and saying, hey, is Christ coming back, or what's the deal? And being able to channel actually truth-seeking information. Because the way the Akashic Records works is the Akashic Records is an etheric library where every event that's ever happened is recorded in this library. And by etheric, I mean it's a place you access whenever you learn how to channel or how to remove you. And some people that get downloads or visions or things like that are already naturally accessing the Akashic Records, but may not realize that or may not know how to access this on demand, right? So that's what I teach you in the Akashic Records class, is how to connect with your spirit guides on demand, how to connect with that guidance and clarity on demand, how to put yourself in a position where you feel really, really confident to be able to move forward and say, yes, I can connect with my guides at any time and get any clarity that I need, because that makes me feel really secure and confident in my gifts. And that also allows me to move forward, right? Because August is a big month that a lot of light workers are being called to step it up. And I say this because we've got like 8/8, we've got the eclipses, we've got the full moons. Like, this is the month where, like, whatever timeline you commit to, 3D or 5D, you're going to be locked in there for a bit, right? Not to say that if you accidentally commit to a 3D timeline in August, you're going to be there forever. But right now, if you're resonating more with that fear, you are going to be probably locked into that vibration for the next like 6 to 9 months as you enter into that final clearing cycle. Versus if right now you're actively seeking the 5D, that's the cycle that you're going to be locked into now moving forward because of all this energy, right? So if right now you feel called to, okay, I got to pick fear, love, you got to pick the higher timeline, because that's what's going to propel you to your purpose, right? So you guys can access my Akashic Records class at the website below, and you can also access that in the show notes. So thank you guys so much for being here. I will be back on another live probably early next week. So I will see you then. And oh, one more thing. If you guys want to try my mystery school for free, I have a 1-week free trial of my mystery school where you can go in and get things like quantum healing activations, past life regression work. So if you want to try that for free, bop to the website. And I do have 2 last minute Hilton Head spots open. So you can go on my website and you can see it is a little bit more expensive last minute to be able to grab a spot, but still super affordable for what you're getting. So if we haven't met in person, I would love to meet you there. I hope you guys have a great week.